Hello.
Hello.
Deus Ex Machina.
My name's Mel Croucher. I am your director, and this is my commentary on Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina.
That's John Pertwee. He's dead.
I want you to pause your player when I count you down.
The player is a cassette player.
Playing
They are dead.
screen's request.
And when this game was written back in
5,
1984, we used a countdown
4,
to synchronize what was happening on screen
3,
with what was happening on the cassette audio.
2,
Back then we had 96K to play with.
pause.
Today we have several million bytes to play with, and I'll leave it to you to judge which version you like best. The original 1984 or the new Retina display.
And compulsory prayers. The last mouse on Earth tried to hide from mankind inside the machine.
The action takes place in the inner eye of the machine,
As the
where
nerve
she
gas
dreams
eased its sphincter,
without knowing that she
the
dreams,
last ever mouse dropping.
until the accident.
A slight accident.
The accident is precipitated by a mouse dropping,
Of this accident.
in other words, is precipitated
With my permission.
by poo,
And lead it up the telepath.
telepathic poo.
I forge your soul in molten
That's the
spark,
voice of Donna Bailey,
which must not stop.
who is very much alive and kicking.
Reach out and touch them.
The gameplay of Deus Ex Machina was kept deliberately simple. We only had 48K to play with, and we cheated by flipping
I tap
over the cassette, which gave us 96
I
kilobytes.
file a number.
In the remake Retina version, we have millions of
I give the
kilobytes,
lie.
and it's up to you to decide which version you prefer, the original 1984
Cover
version
the land
or the brand new
with
Retina
signal
version.
and cable.
In
I
order
am
to
machine.
create life, I started off with
I
some
am machine.
strands of DNA spinning around
I am machine.
in a welder.
I have always
The idea was to keep the DNA spinning
been
and avoid the ever-searching eye of the defect police who were on the lookout for any authorized activity.
was no.
So, simply by
I refuse
touching a slowing strand of DNA, you could speed it up again. A bit like Chinese
obey my
spinning plates in the circus.
I am machine.
Deus Ex Machina took a few weeks to write, a few weeks to program, and a couple of weeks to record this soundtrack.
This is beginning.
I had no money, so I had to play all the musical instruments myself
Unneeded love,
and punch out all the bad
command love.
bits and the bum notes by physically cutting them with a razor blade and sticking the master tape back together again.
This is
It wasn't particularly pretty, but it was cheap.
I am machine.
As soon as I'd completed the soundtrack, I could hand it over to Andy Stagg, the great boy wonder,
Through
the Stagmeister, who I had won in a government lottery called the Youth
in my
Opportunity Scheme. And indeed, he was youthful.
bomb-proof. The DNA
I kept asking him to do stuff, and he kept telling me it was impossible, and then he'd go and do it.
in
And I don't think we had any idea at the time that we were pioneering or creating something that hadn't been done before. But there you go.
in the beginning,
They tell me it was the first ever interactive movie, and I believe them.
and the word is
Whatever it was definitely experienced best with headphones turned up full volume in a darkened room. No pauses, you just played it straight through, both sides, one after the other. I'm not going to tell you much about the making of Deus Ex Machina in this commentary.
All the screens are
It's all in the book called
all the men and women
Deus Ex Machina,
merely play.
the best game you never played in your life.
They have their exits,
I'll keep this commentary to the actual gameplay itself.
and one person in their time plays many parts.
And in this sequence,
Their acts being
we're going
separated.
into cell production, where we have two concentric circles of cells pulsing there, the purple things.
Fueling in the test tube's neck.
The defect police are still represented
Then the
by
whining school child,
the scanning
with
probe,
cassette and
and your
shining
own
morning
control
face,
is
creeping
in
like a
green.
snail, unwillingly to data bank.
The individual cells pulse, and as they lose pulsation, you reanimate them with your green cursor, avoiding the defect police
Sighing like a furnace,
and keeping them alive.
with a woeful video.
A cell that stops
made to
moving
their
is
lovers'
extinguished and dies,
Then,
and it can't
a
be
soul
regenerated.
full of strange
There's
modes,
a score clock down in the right-hand side of the screen,
and quick in
which
thought,
expresses how you're
seeking
doing
high
in your
score,
existence.
even in the laser's mouth.
Above that's a panel which shows the progress of the spark of life. It will start off with a little green speck, grow into an embryonic form, and eventually,
And then
when we're
the
ready,
justice,
away we
in
go.
fair round belly, with eyes
At
severe,
the bottom there are two
and clothes of formal
monitors, one for your brain
full of
pattern,
wise
one for your
words
cardiac
and machine code.
pattern.
And so, they play their part.
And in this exposition, the narrator, John Pertwee, is setting out what's going to happen throughout the game in terms of the 7 ages of man, which, of course, I stole
The
from
sixth
William
age
Shakespeare.
shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon.
The action moves on to the memory bank, which was
Their
meant to
youthful
be
clothes
much more mechanical,
well saved.
with sort of rocking
A world too
units
wide for
of
their
memory.
Frankenstein.
And in the Retina version,
Their
I'm very
adult
pleased with
speech
the
synthesizer
machine
turning
steampunk
again towards
look
a
of the thing.
cherished rebel.
And the idea behind that was you came fully fledged with a built-in memory. But of course, if any of the memory cells stopped rocking or moving, then this would hinder your task and you would lose score. The game itself isn't about score, of course.
Without keyboard,
You can't win, you have to die, I'm afraid.
monitor,
And in the end, you'll always end up with a 0 score.
without power.
I changed the scoring a wee bit for the Retina version, the director's cut. Well, people expect to win these days, don't they? Back then, we all knew we would lose. The next thing to do was to prepare human eggs ready for fertilization. So once again, we had to keep them spinning, moving, warm, and not let them stop and die. They were represented in an infinity pattern, and the spark of life was now apparent in its little display box. Because of the memory restriction, there were a load of sequences that hit the cutting room floor. I had to scrap everything to do with infancy and childhood, but I managed to reinstate those for Deus Ex Machina 2, which happened 25, 30 years later with Christopher Lee taking the John Pertwee part. But the one voice, of course, that couldn't change, in my opinion, was Ian Jury. The greatest sperm of all time.
I'm a fertilizing agent. My brothers are all wiggly. I'm a fertilizer.
I've often said that if I did kick off the British video gaming industry in 1977, then it was born not in a test tube, but in a pint mug. And here is the living proof of the pint mug. So, there on the left-hand side is the spinning egg that we managed to keep warm and liberate in the previous sequence. There's a lot of rival sperms knocking around, but yours is the super sperm. And
tax collectors. And
Your
so-
task is to guide it towards the egg, get it to nudge its little head in there, and we will have a zygote. We will have life. We will have a human being.
Fish and chips
Which, of
and
course,
cycle clips.
will turn
Fish
out
and
to be
chips and
the
cycle
player.
clips. Fish and chips and cycle clips. Fish and chips.
And the line is not fish and chips and cycle clips. It is fission, ships, and cycle eclipse.
High and noble.
To tell the truth, this entire sequence was recycled from an earlier game,
High and noble.
I think about 1981,
As I'm swimming.
called Love and Death.
I giggle and wiggle
But hey,
and make a
you got to have humour in games, I think. And this
Hello,
was
little bell.
deliberately set out
I believe
to be
I have an
funny.
appointment with destiny.
And to all those people who complained about bad taste at the time, I'm sorry, but every one of them started just like this.
First, the infant, mewling in the test tube's neck.
The voice of the defect, I'm afraid, first time round was done by me, simply because I had run out of money and couldn't afford to get another singer in. So, not much we can do about that. And the graphics were obviously meant to be a lot darker first time round, but at least for the director's cut retina version, I think we got there in the end. 30 years later. So here we are in the incubator. Electrocardiograph has registered the heartbeat, and we're protecting and nourishing our new life. Trying to strengthen it and keep its cocoon intact in that electronic womb, using our cursor to keep everything going and trying not to let any part of its protection fail or stop. What we're trying to do here is build up as much strength as possible for the next stage, which is our own birth. I was in a museum recently, literally inside a glass case, and the original artwork for this sequence was on display with a label on it saying it was a profound example of early concept computer art. And in fact, what it was the only felt tip pens I had around at the time, which is why the colours are, well, as they are. But the next sequence, the birth sequence, originally carried a sort of health warning. When we had cathode ray tube monitors to play the game on, television screens, in fact, you had to sit pretty close to play it normally. And, well, there was a serious risk of migraine attacks or epileptic fits with this sort of strobe effect. And we're in an umbilical delivery tube. The spinning baby, spinning fetus, starts off on the left-hand side of the screen, gradually moves towards the right, making your reaction time shorter as the sequence progresses. The scans of the defect police are now probing sort of eye camera thingies, blinking, searching, and of course you need to avoid them. The whole sequence is a sort of slalom, a slimy slalom, all accompanied by the choir of the test tube babies, who had a ball at the time. They were a class of school kids. They were supposed to be doing art at the time, and we just we hijacked the lesson and played the sequence and got them all to sing along, and they loved it. So here's to the Year 3 Warblington School, 1984. Whatever you're doing now, I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you. How Andy Stagg managed to cram all of this into a 48K Spectrum, I know not. And the same goes for Colin Jones when it went to him for the Commodore 64 and the MSX version. They worked miracles at the time, which is exactly what I expected of them. Nothing less than miracles.
Alpha to Omega.
Ah, Frankie Howard,
Unauthorized activity.
the Defect Police.
Frequencies of the machine. Isolate and program
Frankie Howard used to terrify me when I was a kid, and he came on the radio. I thought he was really spooky.
touching the light.
So this was my revenge,
Touching the light.
to get him into a small dark room and pay him to speak my words. It must have been about this time that players probably gave up. Those who experienced Deus Ex Machina on pirate versions, and most of them did. I think the piracy rate probably hit the record, but the pirates didn't bother with the soundtrack. They just duplicated the game itself, and without the soundtrack, it was nonsense. So I think most people who played the original version of the game just thought it was crap and had no idea what was going on. There you go.
Follow the sequence.
Follow the sequence.
Touching the light.
Touching the light. This is my favourite Frankie Howard bit coming up. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
What have we here? A defect algae bound. A quantity of protein crawling on the ground.
The spinning figure that you have to protect from the probes of Frankie Howard and his defect police
What is it?
was supposed to be an infant, and then an adolescent,
Let's scoop it up
and then
for probing
to
and
just progress.
and keep
But
the
we
underlevels
didn't have the memory,
free
we didn't have the
from
graphics,
this
so
sort
the
of
figure is pretty samey all the way through, unfortunately. We've
Shove it
managed to
in,
rectify
sir.
this on
Set
the
it on the rack. I
the
thought
30th
I'd
anniversary
order
special
to
edition.
throw the defect back. Funny.
Yes, Mrs. All these sequences are basically ping pong, where you deflect the probes with your telepathic bat. In fact, all games, as I often say, are only made of 3 elements, which is chess, dice, and ping pong. Deus Ex Machina is mostly ping pong. There's very little dice in it in terms of luck of the game. There's very little chess in it in terms of logistics. It's mostly ping pong, folks. Life is ping pong.
Occasionally, with a hint of my wondrous power.
Little musical quote from Frank Zappa coming up
It's no problem. It's easy surrounded
from
by
200 Motels.
like the ventilation
Check it out.
system and the security
And liberal use of the vocoder that I invested in for this project. It was very, very simple back then. I was working on my own, just doing all the music and doing all the designs and artwork and stuff. And there was nobody else to consult, so I was working in isolation. But it was a great freedom. And sometimes I think that today's vast teams of programmers and designers and accountants and lawyers and planning committees, they just get in the way, really, of the original vision. And if the original vision is half decent, it should come shining through. It's both amusing and depressing over 30 years on to see the same old crap being turned out in terms of gameplay and themes, but we always have choice.
And then the lover.
And one of those choices is
Sighing like a furnace.
kissing instead of
With a
killing.
soulful video made to their lover's hologram.
I really like this sequence, the lover sequence, and I got a lot of flack for it originally, both from parents and critics, People saying, I don't know. Wait, what's this figure? Is it male or female? What's it doing with no clothes on? What are all these lips? Is it playing with itself? Oh, I don't know. What's wrong with that? And I always answered the critics in the same way, which was, would you rather have your children learning how to kiss or learning how to kill? The sequence is about anticipating where the lips are going to land and meeting them with a gentle touch, a gentle reciprocation. Anyway, we were dealing with pixels, which was just blobs on a screen. I mean, how much detail could you get into that? Come on. So for all those critics of then and now who didn't like what was going on, all I can say is the figure was meant to be, by this time, a 16-year-old. And in the updated version, we managed to change the graphics to reflect that. Oh, I quite like this solo. I think this was just one take. I think so. Anyway, the sequence progressed into a post 16 age, where love gave way to guilt, betrayal, and the lips turned to eyes, all-seeing eyes, sort of precursor to the selfie generation, the Facebook generation, the all-seeing paparazzi, loving celebrity slurping idiocy of what was to come. So this time round you used your telepathic shields to defend yourself from the probing eyes, which were not necessarily those of the defect police. They were everything going on out there for young people. And in the words of Frankie Howard, who said,
God knows what happens next. I don't.
But I do. At this point, you were supposed to turn your cassette over, resync it with the game, and enjoy part 2
God knows what happens next.
of Deus Ex Machina.
This is an order.
Frankie Howard came back in stroppy mode
Restart your player at the screen's command.
and got players to synchronize the
That
sound
is all.
with the action. There's a great outtake
5, 4,
where he actually screws up the countdown.
1.
Instead of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it went 5, 4, 2, 3. I don't know what it does. Anyway,
A soldier.
we've got that on
full
tape
of
somewhere
strange oaths.
on a compilation of
Just
outtakes.
in honor. Sudden and quick in quarrel.
By this time in the game, you'd grown old enough to
In the
be
laser's mouth.
taken for a soldier, and you stood erect, saluting a sort of clenched fist salute or a stiff arm salute. It didn't really matter, left or right, it's all the same. And the purpose of this sequence was to encourage you to not fight, but desert. Everything comes from behind in terms of the weaponry. You're
War
running
crimes
away,
are
you're not
easy.
running to.
The uniform's free.
The ground was moving under your feet.
Don't follow me.
Pitfalls appeared beneath you, and the
Into
idea was to
past.
jump over them, to leap them.
War crimes are
But
easy.
you weren't really in control of your own
This
actions.
gun's
There's a particular spot where
War crimes are easy.
the defect police voice orders you to jump,
War
and
crimes
you
are
you
easy.
jump. There's nothing you can do about it.
Crimes are easy.
I suppose today we call this sort of thing post-traumatic stress
When I say
disorder or
jump,
battlefield syndrome.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
All the hazards in this sequence
Jump.
Listen to me.
are psychological.
Listen to me.
So
Killing is wrong.
these aren't weapons that you see.
Even
These are
10 killing on little
these are what happens to the soldier,
people that sell
having
violent
experienced
games to children should be
war,
put away somewhere safe.
perhaps participated
well
in their own war
We're
crimes.
only obeying orders.
So
Don't waste the life
there-
I gave you.
the stuff
Waste
coming down from
someone
overhead,
else's.
All
these
you need
little
is
thingies, they're mental
All you
tortures.
have is
Walls of fire thrown in your
War
pathway.
crimes are
These are
easy. War crimes
these are psychological barriers to progress.
easy.
They're self-consuming
crimes are easy.
backstabbers coming up behind you.
Very
They're all in the mind.
Crimes are easy.
And again, you use your
Smell a
telepathic shields to protect
March
your
on, empty
running
spaces.
form,
Fill them with
clockwise.
your mind.
or anti-clockwise.
Burn a brain cell, it smell
Um,
like bacon rind.
And if that all sounds like I'm a airy-fairy pacifist
Shield your head
stuck up
from
my own
bombs.
ass, that's because
Shield your back
I'm an
from
airy-fairy
pain.
pacifist
Shield
stuck up my
yourself
own
from
ass.
fireballs.
And
Here we go again.
what you gonna do about it?
War crimes are easy.
By 1984,
Uniform free.
during the production of Deus Ex Machina, I was already getting very hacked off with the way the industry was going
Jump without
in terms of violent content and acquisitiveness of gameplay. I thought we were better than that, but maybe we weren't. Nice bit of heavy breathing there before the European International Anthem kicks in. Take it away, Ludwig. If you need reminding or telling about the context of what was going on politically while Deus Ex Machina was being written and launched, it was that we were pretty much on the edge of nuclear conflict between East and West.
we had achieved, my defect.
It was
Have rolled over us.
it was a pretty scary time.
All are mine.
Anyway, it was at this point in the proceedings that
Your power
you, the player, the central character, the defect, took command of your own destiny,
No questions, Captain.
and
Only a short statement.
whatever you learned so far would
I'm
now
no
be
longer
put
working for you.
to good or bad use.
The defect police are now working for me.
What do you mean?
Visually, this the sequence was a
Rearrange his
total mess
personality.
on screen. It was just the limitations of resources and memory, really. We had to use pre-existing graphics, recycle them, split them up, mix them around a bit. It wasn't very successful. It's come out a little bit better in the Retina version, the updated version, but still not perfect. Never mind. Onwards. I found out quite recently that many players of the original game just sat there and didn't play it at all. They just watched what was going on and listened to the soundtrack and treated it as a movie, which is a bit disappointing, but there you go. I suppose it works like that.
And machine code.
Maybe they didn't want to be associated with becoming
Play their
a fat slob bastard in this sequence, which is what happens when you achieve power or carry burdens of life, perhaps. Anyway, you had the freedom of choice at this point as your empire spread out behind you, to make your own decisions, to crush corruption in your path, to avoid harming noble sentiments, or to jump for joy over good stuff and stomp out evil underfoot. Originally, the limitations of graphics meant that we could express these in very crude terms, either simple short words or pretty crude representations of skulls and stuff. In the updated Retina version, we've done a bit better. Anyway, it's still up to you what you think is good, what you think is bad, what you want to jump on and crush, what you want to leap over to save. Or you can resist the temptation to do nothing at all, just like some of those original players. Just sit there and watch it all go to pot. I remember we had one hell of a problem in the recording session with dear Donna Bailey, who did the vocals for this, and I cut in the voice of Professor Edward Thompson at this point to deliver a short lecture as the voice of reason to cover the gap. He was an optimist. I thought at the time we were all about to tip over the brink and start lobbing trident missiles at one another. E.P. Thompson would have none of it. He was confident that the walls would be breached and the barbed wire would be cut. The words were his, of course. The ground is moving under their feet, and the ground is us. Eventually, we got Donna's voice in the can and managed to splice it all together, and ended up with some sort of an audio track to this sequence. I was no spring chicken, of course, when this game originally came out. I'd already been through several careers, and I'd probably been through the first 4 ages of man myself, maybe 5, I don't know. But I hadn't got into old age, senility, second childishness yet. That was to be reserved for now. Then I still had the ambition to be a guitar player, so I strapped it on and came up with my favourite Peter Gunn riff. Yeah, nice. I suppose all I ever really wanted to do was be in a rock and roll band and force feed people some music. And video games seem as good a way as any to, well, as an excuse. It is an excuse to produce music and pretend they were soundtracks to video games. And even if people deliberately didn't set out to listen to my stuff, they had to do it. They had to do it anyway if they wanted to play the games. So, this particular bit is nothing but self-indulgence. As of course is the entire soundtrack of Deus Ex Machina. I think everything I said earlier about having to do all the music myself because I couldn't afford to pay anybody else might be slightly untrue. I did it because I could, because I wanted to.
The sixth age shifts into the lean
The sixth age. The age to which I had become familiar.
Their youthful clothes well set.
Oh yes.
A world too wide.
My shrunken shank. My adult speech synthesizer turning again towards a childish treble, piping and whistling in its sound. I've been in a wheelchair recently, not through senility, but stupidity. Falling off ancient monuments and things like that. But it is a real insight into what's to come. I'm walking again now. Not much damage done, but it was. It puts it all into perspective.
Without power supply.
And when this sequence was originally recorded and written, I had no idea what it would be really like. To clap out and be at the mercy of, well, everything really. Anyway, I'm better now. The final sequences of Deus Ex Machina alternate between what's happening on the outside and what's happening on the inside. On the outside, you slowly lose your mobility. The mechanism for the gameplay is a bit like one of those kids' wire and hoop games where you had to pass a hoop around a bendy wire without touching the wire. Otherwise, you'd make a little electric contact and lose. So, on the inside, it was about blood cells, plasma, rogue cells.
Imagine if this were nothing but an electronic game.
The whole thing was, imagine if this was nothing but an electronic game, and if you could only start all over again, hey, that would be great. Or would it? I don't know. Perhaps not. Up to you. Some people probably do see their lives as some sort of percentage score. Bankers, politicians. Some people don't. Cartoonists, rabbis. I'm not really sure if I should have been explaining the gameplay throughout this commentary. Probably not. It would be better, I think, to discover the gameplay for yourself. So in the various blood clot, plasma and rogue cell sequences, you wouldn't be quite sure if you were meant to break up the cells or herd them together or get them to bounce off a little goal that appears right at the end of the final internal sequence. Because when you get to the final age, you don't actually quite know what's going on, what the rules are, what the rules have been. And you do get weary. And if you do want to stop and clock off, that's your prerogative. And I did miss my mummy. She died during the making of Deus Ex Machina, and maybe that's what sort of precipitated the whole thing. I used Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man eulogy, for her eulogy, and it just kept repeating, and I ended up writing it out on a piece of paper. I'm thinking, hey, this would make a good video game. Actually, I thought, hey, this would make a great soundtrack. Let's try and find some crap gameplays to go with it. And the tragedy was that she never got to the final age. She never even got to the one before that. So amidst all the funny sperms and the lippy lips and all that stuff, there was some sadness. And that's a perfect reflection of the way it goes, obviously. No life is a bowl of cherries. No life is total tragedy. Must be some sort of balance, I think. And the same goes for any video game. You must have balance. You must have light and shade. Soft and loud. This is a bit of soft. That instrument is a Chinese lute called a pipa. Oh well, probably time I got out my mouth organ. And gave my thanks to John Pertwee for what he did.
Your life is expressed as a percentage score.
Almost perfect. It's all done in one take, all done in one session. And that's just after he fell off a motorbike to get to the studio. We became friends after Deus and did stuff together, including a book.
Last mouse on
Nice
Earth
man, very nice man.
tried for mankind.
And he was the reason that Christopher Lee joined up for the Deus Ex Machina 2 to take over his part. He knew John Pertwee way back, and they had flats near each other, a basement flat, I think. So he did it out of friendship for John. Both professional to the eyeballs. Oh yes. It's interesting to compare the two versions that you've got of the game. The blocky graphics from 30 plus years ago. The new enhanced graphics from nowish. Does it make any difference? I'm not really sure. I think so. I think they each have their strengths, they each have their weaknesses. It will be very difficult for a player who's never experienced a Commodore 64 or a Spectrum or an MSX to understand what the hell we had to put up with, But back then, I always had the vision in my head of what I wanted. And of course, it was impossible to create it, to put it on screen. I really thought that within a few years, by the 1990s, that everyone would be making interactive movies with realistic graphics and really involved gameplays where you didn't become passive cinema viewer, you became an active member of the cast. But didn't really happen, did it? It's still the same old stuff. And now that this package is done and dusted, the original version, the Retina version, Deus Ex Machina 2, the book, the soundtracks from Deus 1 and Deus 2. That's it. That's it for me. I won't be coming back to it. There won't be the 50th anniversary version. I've said all I have to say, really. And it is what it is. No more, no less. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. And I really hope you've got something out of Deus Ex Machina. Bye.
And if you are dismayed, be cheerful now. Our revels all unended. These, our actors, are all spirits, and are melted into air, thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the giant screen itself, all which we inherit, shall dissolve, and, like an insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a bite behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep.
Who's that? What you got? I'm so sorry. I'm so very tired. What did I do?
We don't inherit the of our ancestors. We borrow it from our children.
Imagine? Imagine if we could begin our little life all over again. Imagine if it was all nothing more than some electronic game. Imagine if I knew then what I know now.
What did you learn?
I can't quite remember, but I'll try and be better next time. One question.
One answer.
Well, there's a strange sensation on the cheek, It has not felt such a thing before. It is damp and warm and salty. Please tell me what it is.
Is what human beings used to call a
I'm a fertilizing agent. My brothers are all wriggly. Fertilizing agent. My brothers are all wriggly. Touch us with a digit. Make us go all giggly. Ha 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 ha. Hello. Fertilizing agent. My brothers are all wriggly. I'm a fertilizing agent. My brothers are all wriggly. Touch us with a digit. Make us go all giggly. Fertilizing agent. Brothers are all wriggly. Fertilizing agent. Brothers are all wriggly. Touch us with a digit. Make us go all giggly. Stir us up, Tavarich. Handy as a manual. Sinister and Dexter. Handy as a manual. Help us, Father Woodlice, tax collectors and a spaniel. My aim is high and noble. I'm singing as I'm swimming. My aim is high and noble. I'm singing as I'm swimming. I giggle and I wriggle and make a new beginning. Imagine if we could begin our little life all over again. Imagine if it was all nothing more than some electronic game. Imagine if I knew then what I know now. Hello, little bell. I believe we have an appointment with destiny. A short life, but a happy one. Deus ex Machina. The satellites are shining. The acid rain looks pretty. I'm a fertilizing agent. Ha 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 ha.